I stood guard for 8 hours straight. My eyes burned, scanning the cracked earth and the skeletons of the old world. I was protecting them, all of them. Protecting them from the things that whisper and crawl through the toxic twilight. Turns out, the real monsters weren't out in the wasteland. They were already inside. While I was out there shivering in a wind full of fallout, they held a vote. A quiet little democratic decision. When I got back, exhausted and half frozen, ready for the one place I called home, this was my reward. It all started 3 months ago. I was alone, half dead, and they offered me paradise. Before the shelter, my world was just grit and gray. Every sunrise was a curse, just another damn day of looking for something that wouldn't kill you. Life was a constant dull ache of hunger in my gut. It was the metallic tang of irradiated water you had to force down because dying of thirst was worse. It was the dry rasp of my own breathing and the silence of a dead city. For 2 years after the flash, I made it on my own. I learned to read the color of rust on a can to guess if it was poison. I learned the difference between the wind's whistle and the hiss of a gas crawler. But loneliness, that's a different kind of radiation. It seeps into your bones, slow-like. You start talking to yourself, then you start answering. You forget what another person's voice sounds like. The simple comfort of not being the only one staring into the dark. I was tough, yeah. I was a survivor. But I was also just a ghost haunting the ruins, and I was starting to fade. Hope was a flickering ember, and the wind was picking up. I was just so tired of being alone, so tired of thinking my last breath would be all by myself, with nothing but dust and rot to see me go. That's where my head was at when I found the signal. It was weak, looping, more a feeling than a sound, just one word over and over. Sanctuary. That word was a hook, and it dragged me 50 miles across a broken world. It led me to a graveyard of collapsed overpasses from the before times, and there, tucked behind the wreck of an old military transport, was the source. Not some grand gate, just a simple reinforced steel hatch, almost swallowed by the rubble. It was clean, too clean. No rust, no graffiti from the desperate gangs marking their turf. That told me it was active. I waited a whole day, just watching from a distance. Out here, paranoia is what keeps you alive. Was it a trap, a lure for cannibals? In the end, the weariness, this bone-deep need for it to be real, won out over the fear. I walked up to the hatch, found a little intercom, and pressed the button. My heart was hammering my ribs, a voice crackled, sharp and wary.
Identify yourself.
The name's RavenFox, I said. My own voice was a stranger, all rough from disuse. I'm alone, I'm not sick, I just heard the broadcast. There was a long pause. I could hear muffled talking. I was ready to run, to just melt back into the ruins I knew. But then the voice came back, softer.
Stand back from the hatch.
I did what he said. With a hiss of hydraulics, the heavy steel disc lifted up, showing a brightly lit staircase going down into the earth. Hey, if you're listening to this, you're still alive. That means you're doing something right. Take a moment and hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel immensely. Now, stay close. The man at the bottom who greeted me was Elias. Older guy. He had those tired eyes that had seen the end of the world but still had a little flicker of decency in them. He wasn't holding a weapon, at least not openly. A few others stood behind him, their faces a mix of curious and deeply suspicious.
Welcome to Bastion, RavenFox.
Elias said, his voice calm.
We're a simple community. We run on 2 things, shared rules and a fair chance. Everyone pulls their weight, everyone gets a vote, everyone is safe.
Shared rules, a fair chance, safety. I hadn't heard those words in years. They were relics from a world that had burned down. Hearing them in this clean, well-lit bunker felt like a dream. They scanned me for rads, checked my pathetic little pack, and then they led me inside. It was a damn marvel, a repurposed Cold War military bunker. Hydroponic farms glowed under purple lights, a water purifier hummed a steady tune, and the air was clean. There were 5 of them. Elias, the leader. Anya, the medic who gave me a checkup that was thorough but gentle. Marcus, the engineer, a guy who talked about the shelter's machinery like it was his kid. And a quiet couple, Ben and Lena, who ran the farms. They offered me a bowl of stew. Real vegetable stew, not scavenged, not questionable, but grown. As I ate, the warmth spreading through my chest was more than just the soup. It was relief. The crushing weight of being alone for 2 years started to lift. For the first time since the flash, I let my guard down. I thought I'd found a home. I believed their promise. At first, it was perfect. A life I didn't think was possible anymore. The routine was a blessing. Wake up, eat together, get my job from Elias. My years out in the wastes made me a hell of a scout and a good guard. I knew the surface better than any of them. I'd map out scavenging runs, spot threats, and stand the long watches on the surface cameras. I was pulling my weight. I was useful. The shared meals were the best part. We'd all sit at this long metal table, and for an hour, it was like the old world was back. We'd talk about the books in their little library or things we remembered from before. Marcus would bitch about the air filter, and Anya would tell stories from when she was a doctor. I didn't talk much about my past, those 2 brutal years, but I listened. I soaked up the feeling of community like a man dying of thirst. I felt like I had a purpose. Protecting this tiny flicker of humanity felt more important than just my own survival. I taught Ben how to reinforce the fences. I showed Anya which old world herbs, if you could find them clean, still worked as medicine. I was becoming one of them. They called me their Wasteland watchman. I was their eyes on the dying world above, and I was proud of it. I was part of the group, or so I thought. The shift happened about 3 months in. We were at our evening meal. Everything felt normal until Elias cleared his throat and put his fork down. The little clink cut through the chatter like a gunshot. Everyone went quiet.
I have an announcement,
he said. His voice had lost all its warmth. He stared at the table, not at us.
I've run the numbers 3 times. The water purifier's main filter is failing. The hydroponics are drawing more power than the system can sustain. The long-term projections, they're not good.
He finally looked up, and I saw a look in his eyes I knew all too well. It was the cold, hard math of the wasteland.
Based on our current consumption rates,
he said, his voice flat.
Food stores will be critical in 1 month. Water rationing starts tomorrow. We have to make some difficult choices.
The silence in that room was heavier than any bunker door. All that camaraderie from 5 minutes ago. Gone. Evaporated. Replaced by this thick, suffocating tension. Suddenly, we weren't a community. We were 6 survivors in a box, and the box was getting smaller. I saw Lena's hand instinctively cover Ben's. Marcus just stared at his plate, his jaw tight. For the first time since I got there, I felt like an outsider again. The 6th chair, the last one in. The difficult choices started small. The next morning, the water dispenser hissed out exactly 1 liter for each person. My cup felt a little light. I told myself I was imagining it. Then came the meals. The stew portions were smaller for everyone, sure, but mine was mostly broth. Anya, who used to chat with me while I cleaned my gear, was suddenly always too busy, always needing to recatalog supplies. Then came the whispers. I'd walk into the engineering bay, and Elias and Marcus would just stop talking, standing over some schematic. I'd pass the farms, and the conversation between Ben and Lena would die. They weren't mean about it. No one was aggressive. It was worse. It was procedural. I was being quietly and efficiently cut out of the group. I tried to fight it. I doubled down. I volunteered for extra guard shifts, pushed myself farther on scav runs, bringing back anything I could find. Wire, batteries, whatever. I was trying to prove I was worth keeping. I was their Wasteland watchman, remember? But every time I brought something back, Elias's smile wouldn't reach his eyes.
Good work, RavenFox.
He'd say.
Every little bit helps.
The praise felt like a pat on the head before sending me away. That paranoia I'd worked so hard to bury came roaring back. I started sleeping with my knife again. I started watching them as much as I watched the surface monitors. The scariest part? I didn't sense any real hate. It was all so quiet, so logical. I was a variable in a survival equation, and I was starting to think I was the one they were planning to subtract. The night it happened, Elias himself gave me the watch, the long one. Full 8 hours, dusk till dawn. He came over to me after another one of those silent, tense dinners.
RavenFox,
he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. A month ago, that would have felt like friendship. Now it just felt like he was marking me.
we need you on the surface tonight. Your eyes are the sharpest. Take the full shift. We need to feel safe.
We need to feel safe. The words twisted in my gut. He was sending me out to protect them from ghouls while the real threat was a quiet conversation happening right here. I looked him dead in the eye, trying to find a lie, but his face was a blank mask. Of course, Elias, I said, my voice somehow steady. I geared up in silence, my pistol with its 6 precious bullets, my knife, a canteen with my ration of water, 1 protein bar. When I got to the top of the stairs, I looked back. They were all there, watching me. Anya, Marcus, Ben, Lena. Not a single one could meet my eye. Only Elias held my stare. On his face was a look of what I now realize was just detached pity. He gave me a short final nod.
Keep us safe, RavenFox.
I stepped out. The heavy hatch hissed shut behind me. I found my usual overwatch spot in a collapsed building, the one with a clear view of the entrance. The wind howled. For 8 hours, I did my job. I protected my home. I protected the people who were, at that very moment, voting me out of existence. Dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and sick orange. I was bone-tired, cold deep in my joints, but satisfied. The night was quiet. The shelter was safe. I headed back, thinking only of a warm cup of recycled coffee, hoping that maybe I had been wrong, that my paranoia was just that. I saw it from a distance. The hatch. It looked wrong. The outer manual wheel, the emergency release, was gone. In its place was a smooth, welded plate. Cold dread, colder than the wind, crawled up my spine. I stood in front of the keypad, my fingers shaking a little as I punched in my code. Beep, beep. Access denied. I tried again, slower. Access denied. My breath hitched. Elias, Marcus. I yelled into the intercom, my voice cracking. It's RavenFox. Keypad's acting up. Open up. Static. Only static. I started banging on the hatch, my fists thudding against the cold steel. Hello? Anyone? I'm back. My voice sounded pathetic, swallowed by the empty wasteland. And then I heard it. A sound from inside, carried through the thick metal. Not a voice, a machine. A low grinding of massive gears. It was followed by a series of deep, heavy sounds. Thunk. 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 The final deadbolts. The permanent ones. I stopped banging. I just stood there, my hand flat against the steel. It wasn't even cold anymore. It was just dead. They hadn't argued with me. They hadn't fought me. They didn't even have the guts to tell me to my face. They waited until I was gone, protecting them, and then they held their vote. They sealed the door. They erased me. The realization didn't hit me like a punch. It was a slow, creeping numbness, like a limb freezing solid before it snaps clean off. I was home, and I was locked out forever. I didn't move for a full hour. I just stood there, staring at that welded plate where the handle used to be. My mind just white noise. There was no rage, no screaming. That had all been crushed by the finality of those deadbolts. This was a quiet execution. My membership to the human race had been revoked. Finally, the numbness gave way to the sun getting higher. I was exposed. The very things I'd been protecting them from would be sniffing around here soon. My survival instincts, the ones I'd earned over 2 years of loneliness, kicked back in hard. I took stock. 1 pistol, 6 rounds. My knife, a half-empty canteen, and 1 protein bar. It was a death sentence, but it was what I had. I took one last look at the sealed hatch, the tomb where I'd buried my trust. They didn't just lock me out. They left me to die with an almost surgical precision, with none of the resources I'd helped them gather. I turned my back on Bastion and started walking. Every direction looked the same, but the wasteland felt different now. It wasn't just empty and hostile. It felt like it had personally rejected me. The loneliness I felt before was a dull ache. This was a sharp, gaping wound. The first few days were a blur. The protein bar was gone in a blink. The water by day 2. The wasteland was harsher than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just gotten soft in their climate-controlled world. The hunger was a clawing beast in my gut. The thirst was a fire in my throat. I stumbled through an old city running on nothing but despair and stubbornness. I hunted mutated rats in the sewers. Their meat was stringy and tasted like chemical rot, but it was food. I found a dripping pipe deep in a subway tunnel, the water oily and black. But I filtered it through a scrap of my shirt and drank, praying it wouldn't kill me. One evening, hiding from an acid rain, I found it. An old radio relay tower, a skeleton of rust pointing a finger at the sky. It stood on a low hill inside a busted chain-link fence. It wasn't a bunker, it wasn't safe, but it was defensible. And it was empty. Slowly, piece by piece, I made it mine. I used what I knew to set snares and traps around the fence line. I patched the holes with scrap metal and sharpened rebar. I built a crude little shelter at the base out of corrugated steel. It was ugly. It was cold. But nobody gave it to me. I built it. Every nail I hammered, every trap I set was an act of defiance. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress, and it was built for one. Weeks turned into months. The tower became my whole world. My senses, which had gone dull in the bunker, sharpened again. I could smell rain on the wind a day away. I could hear the skittering of a radroach from 100 feet. I was a creature of the wasteland again, but different now. Harder, wiser. The soft parts of me had been burned away by what they did. One day I was scavenging in a sector I hadn't been to since my time in the shelter, and I found him. It was Ben, or what was left of him. He was lying near the entrance of a collapsed supermarket, his shelter jumpsuit torn, his face a mask of frozen terror. He hadn't been dead long, picked clean by predators, looked like a scav run gone wrong. It seemed their supply problem wasn't solved by kicking me out after all. I looked down at his body, and I waited to feel something. Satisfaction, revenge, even pity. But there was nothing, just a cold, empty space. He was just another body, another victim of the world's harsh math. His death meant nothing to me, and right then, I finally got it. They didn't hate me. That was the most insulting part. Hate is a passion. Hate is personal. This was never personal. It was a calculation. It was a quiet vote tallied in a warm room while I stood guard for them in the cold. I was a number on a spreadsheet that didn't add up, so they rounded me down to 0. They didn't see a person. They saw a resource they could manage, and when it was convenient, throw away. Their betrayal wasn't an act of malice. It was an act of efficiency. I left Ben's body for the Wasteland to reclaim and walked back to my tower. I didn't look back. They thought sealing that door was my death sentence. They thought they were ensuring their survival by sacrificing mine. But they were wrong. Sealing that door was the moment I was really born into this world. It burned away the last weakness I had from the old one. Trust. The Wasteland doesn't punish trust. It simply removes it. It doesn't care about fairness or votes. It rewards strength, awareness, and above all else, absolute self-reliance. They taught me that. Elias, Anya, Marcus. They were my final, most brutal teachers. They didn't just teach me how to die. They taught me how to truly live. Alone, strong, unbreakable. I trusted a Wasteland shelter once. Never again. If you made it through this, you're a survivor. If you want to hear more tales from the wastes, like this video and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. Would you have begged? Would you have hunted them down for revenge? Or would you have just walked away?